Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at poker in D&D. I've used poker several times in my D&D games, and I'm going to go over a couple of the different variations I've done. Some just being straight poker play, some being having magical elements, things like that. So today we're going to take a look at poker at the D&D table. Also, a quick reminder, please subscribe. If you have already, thank you. And Patreon, please take a look at it. I'm trying to make a couple of technical upgrades, and I could use some help for that. That's it. And Patreons, thank you. Or patrons, thank you. End of commercial. Back to the important thing. Games of chance, specifically poker, used in AD&D today on page 121. Poker in AD&D. I've used this several ways in AD&D over the years. One night I just did it where the group was at a tavern that had gambling going on, and I let them bet gold coins and play poker. It was an opportunity to role play. Was a little different group than our ordinary group, and I played poker with some of the other guys. Let me do a quick disclaimer on the poker games. The poker games I'll be describing here are ones I learned when I was younger and have played for years, but they are also native to the Chicago area. I realize that poker has a lot of different rules and a lot of variants and a lot of variant names. Please don't send me a bunch of comments telling me I'm doing this wrong or that wrong. I'm going to be playing the poker the way I learned it, but also importantly, the way I ran it in my games. So the very first game that we play is 5-card stud. When you play poker, generally the goal is to get the best hand you can out of 5 cards. So a high pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind, going to a straight, which is any 5 cards in sequence, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, jack, queen, king, ace, or a flush, which is 5 cards, all the same suit, and so on, 4 of a kind. So you get the idea. So I'm not going to go into a ton of the rules per se, just letting you know. So a 5-card stud, the way we always played it, would be 1 card up. There would be 3 players for this hand. And then the next are down. So we would bet this. First 7 would bet, and then we would go to the next one. This one is down. You only you see it. So for my case, I would have a 6-7. So we would go again. We would bet on each turn of the card, or each time the cards are dealt out. So this guy would look at his, decide if he's going to stay in and bet. Now, when we played this in D&D, I kind of cut to the chase. We just made it per hand. I had everybody kind of bet a pot of so many gold pieces, rather than raising and everything during the gameplay. So I've got a 7 here with a pair of 6s underneath. So I've got a pair of pocket 6s. So I'm going to probably stick around. Pocket 6s can actually be a good hand in 5-card stud. King high over here. I doubt he would stay, but he might. And here we have ace high here. So as you see, first off, this game is better with 5 to 6 to 7 players. But second, you can have pretty low hand, pair of 6s, and win the hand. So that's 5-card stud. The next one we play is 5-card draw. Before I get into the 5-card draw, a quick note about the cards. These are actually bicycle cards. They're called Dragonbacks. Bicycle is a manufacturer that makes really good playing cards since 1885, according to their box. They usually have spoked wheels. These are Dragonbacks. My son Adam bought as he played D&D poker in D&D when he was away at school. So for 5-card draw, we would deal out 5 cards per player. Again, it would be 3 players. 3 each, 4, and 5. You look at them. You don't show anybody else. You just look, and you decide which of the 5 cards you want to keep or which you want to throw away. You can keep 2 unless you have an ace. We play that you can show the ace and then only keep 1. In this case, I'll keep the pair of 2s. I'll keep it up just so it doesn't get confusing. I'll discard the rest. We'll go to this player. He would actually be first in the rotation. He's got a possible inside straight, a 4 blank 6, 7, 8. He'll get rid of the ace and he's going to try to draw to the straight. That's not easy to do, but he could get lucky with it. And this player has a pair of 6s. He could keep the 3 clubs and try to go for a flush, but he's going to keep the sure thing and go with the pair of sixes. So now, starting with this player, the first player to my left, I deal one card, again, face down. We would bet at this point, tell how many cards we wanted, and then go from there. 1, 2, 3, and I take 3 also. Now we would look at our cards, bet again, and then decide, turn up the cards and decide who won. I've got a pair of deuces, so I'm going to be bought out pretty easily if anybody does any kind of raises. This guy's got queen high. He's going to fold. And this guy has a pair of sixes with a 4 with a jack kicker. He may stay, he may not. As you see, so the sixes win. The small sample size that I'm doing with only 3 players does hurt the value of the hands. Most hands are higher than that. I've used 5-card draw in my gameplay. Specifically, I did it a couple of times for higher level group that had a lot of excess magic items. They really didn't use anymore. They had, a couple of +1 swords, +1 dagger, that kind of thing. I thought, well, hey, I'll do a casino where the stakes are a magic item. And the magic item value had to be at least 1,000 experience points in order to sit down and play the game. That ended up being a ton of fun. I played an NPC house, if you will, but I wasn't the house. I was one of the players, but I played an NPC, and I put magic items in as we bet. And then you could raise with any kind of magic item. So if I opened up with a Necklace of Adaptation, for instance, I could then raise with a +1 dagger or something like that. That ended up being a lot of fun because, of course, you had to win the hand to win the magic items in the pot. You ended up with a lot of magic items, some of which weren't useless to the person that got them, but most of which were useless to the person that threw them in the ante. That ended up being a lot of fun. I also did a variant where the players were in a cursed area and they were locked in and they had to play, but it was with a deck of many things. With a deck of many things, of course, the red cards, 10 through ace, are good. The black cards, 10 through ace, are bad. The way I did the game was you had to play and win, and if you won and you had any card 10 through ace, we would then take a look, and I gave you a 25% chance of it being a card from the deck of many things. If that was the case, I pulled up the Queen of Diamonds, of course, because that's the 1 to 4 wishes. So that game became very interesting because if you had a pair of queens or 3 queens, but 2 of the queens were black and 1 queen was red, you knew the 2 black queens were bad. So now you had to gamble. If one of the queens was the Queen of Diamonds, am I going to gamble on getting the black cards on the 25% chance I'd get this card? That ended up being a bunch of fun. The players played that for about 2 hours in actual time. It was a Saturday night game. We go longer on those. And we ended up playing for a very long time with that. I ended up actually giving out a few wishes, and I ended up having to get a couple people rescued by the deck and things like that. It's not something I would do ordinarily. This was a very high-level group, and I felt they were growing a little bored with Standard Dungeon, so I thought I'd try something different. Recently, I did a game, this was only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, where the players played a game called Between the Sheets. I'll explain the game in a moment. And what the players bet in this game, I stepped outside the game itself a little bit. They were betting hit points. Minimum bet was 2, maximum bet was 10. If you lost hit points, it accrued as damage. If you gained hit points, if you managed to gain more hit points, 25% greater than your total number of hit points. So if I had 100 hit points, they didn't, but if I had 100 hit points, and I ended the game with over 125, I got 5 permanent hit points as my reward. That ended up being a lot of fun. Between the Sheets is a vicious little game. One I've played, I remember learning it in grammar school. It's called other things. I looked it up online, but it is known as Between the Sheets. So basically, I turn up one card, I turn up another card, and then I, as the bettor, have to bet if my card will be between the 2 and the 8. So, or the 8 and the 2. So it would be 7, 6, 5, 4, or 3. Minimum bet is 2 hit points. I bet 2 hit points. I have to pay 2 hit points. So I've taken 2 hit points off my total. So then we go to the next player on the table. He gets a 10 and an 8. The only card he can win with is a 9. Minimum bet again is 2 hit points. He bets it and he loses. Next card is a 9 and a jack. Can only be a 10. Bets 2 hit points and loses. Now we got an ace. Your first ace, you have to call high or low. I'm going to call it low. and it's a 9. Didn't really matter much, a little bit better being a 9. I'm going to save 5 hit points. I gain 5 hit points back. Now, if I had already lost hit points, I'd get that back as healing. If I hadn't lost any hit points, I would put that above my total toward my goal of being 25% above my starting total. So then I would go a 9 and a 4. I would bet 2 hit points on that. Because I had a 4 and a 4 came up, I have paid double my wager. 4 lost hit points. Then I would go a 7 and a king. I'll go 5 on that. Ooh, 2, I pay my 5. And this is rotating around the table clockwise. Queen to 5. Feeling pretty sassy on that one. I'm going to go 10. 6, I take 10. So if I hadn't lost any points at this point, I'm 10 points to the good. Jack and a king. Only a queen can win 2 hit points, and I lose. A 5 and a 10. Only 2 hit point bet. I would take it. I would heal the 2. 7 and a 3. I can only win on a 6, 5, or 4. 2 hit point bet. Pay it. 9 and a 6. I can only win on an 8 or a 7. Pay it. That was a 2 hit point bet. A 6 and a 4. I can only win on a 5. Pay it. A 10 and a 5. 2 hit points again. I take it. And so on. That's how the game played. 2 and a 7. I'm looking for a really good spread. Ace. Ace is always high in the middle. A 5 and a 6. On a 5 and a 6, 2 cards in sequence, you automatically lose the bet. You have to pay. No card gets turned up in the middle. Ace, high or low? I'm going to say low again. King, 10 points. Queen, I get the 10 points in healing. A jack and a 3, 10 points. Oh, I pay it. A king and a 3. They'll have to wait till I shuffle the deck. Now, this game is best played if you have a couple of decks you mix together, because you get people like a few of the guys who are playing at my table who count cards and know how to do that. I can to a lesser degree, and a couple of my players can. So if you don't, or if you have players that can count cards, I recommend you get 2 identical decks, just like this one, mix them together, and then play it that way. That way, for instance, if I got an ace and I called it low and a high ace came up, if I know 2 aces have already come up, then I can go ahead and I can bet the farm because I know I can't lose. Okay, so king and a 3, 10 points. Now this is going to be the beginning of the second time through the deck. So I lifted the maximum wager to 25 points. Minimum is 2. He would take 25 points and so on. And after the second time through the deck, I gave the players the option. Do you want to continue playing or do you want to stop? It had to be an all or nothing. So I let it be majority rules. There were 5 players playing. I let it be majority rules. So they decided after the second time through the deck that they'd go a third time, and so on, and then a 4th time. And they did go through 4. At 5, 3 of them said, no, I've had it. And when the game ended, if they had lost, 30 hit points, that was his damage. And if they had gained any hit points over their total, I let them ride as phantom hit points for about, I think I did it for 4 hours. And then those phantom hit points, if not taken as damage, would vanish. And if you were 25% over your total, again, if you had 100 hit points and you ended up with 125, then I gave you 5 permanent hit points and you got to keep the overage as phantom hit points for 4 hours. So that's just a way I worked it in. It wasn't strictly in-game. I've got an 8 and a 2. Ooh, pay double. I turned a 2 against a 2. I have to pay 4. So that's just a game I worked up in the game. I realized that player characters in D&D would not be betting hit points. They would be betting elements of their life force or whatever you want to call it. But I made it clear we were just stepping outside of that for this particular instance, and we had a lot of fun with it. I got a 9 and a 4, 2. Pay it. 4 and a high ace. 25. Take it. That was how the game works. I had a lot of people end up 10 and a 9. Pay your 2. Ace, I'll call it low. Queen, high. I'll say 25. Take it. I had a lot of people get burned where they would come up with 2 cards in a row. A jack and a high ace, that's lousy. Second ace is always high, by the way. You don't get to choose. So he had to pay it. A queen and a 5. 25. Now, I had the same card come up. I wanted to hit this before I wrap the video. If the same card comes up as either one of these, in this case the queen came up, I bet 25, I have to pay double. I have to pay 50 because the card came up and burned me. And that happens a lot in this game. In the game, of course, you're betting dimes, quarters, nickels, whatever you're playing. We don't play poker for money. This is strictly within D&D. And but if this game can get very expensive if you are playing it for money, which of course we weren't doing. This is just for hit points. In this case, the player lost, and this did happen, and the player lost 50 hit points in one shot. He was one of the people that voted to call it because he was getting very close to zero. So there you have it. That's a look at a little bit of poker in D&D. I've also used blackjack. I've used 7-card stud, which is a little different and frankly a little more technical and was a little beyond a couple of the players. Maybe I'll feature that depending on how this video does. I'll go into some of that. And I've also just done a primitive version of craps where you just throw the dice and then you bet whatever on whether you make the pass or not. So as you can see, I don't mind incorporating real life games into D&D. And this particular game, poker, of course, just lends itself to D&D. It was a lot of fun. The players really enjoyed all the versions I've thrown out over the years. And I plan on doing it sometime down the line. So that's all I've got to say today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. Please leave any comments. Remember, these are games that I learned regionally here in Chicago. I realize there are variants out there. If you have some interesting variants or something you want to comment, please feel free. But that's all I've got today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.